Hi, and welcome to the third episode of the Cybr Resume Review Show. My name is Christoph Limpler, and in today's episode, I'm joined by a repeat guest, and her name is Sara. She's with a company called Dialexa as an IT recruiter, and she has years and years of experience in reviewing IT resumes. Now, in this specific episode, we actually have 3 different student-submitted resumes, so if you yourself are a student, you're going to get a lot of actionable information from this episode, and even if you're not a student, I still think you'll get some good actionable information. But we also have 2 other prior episodes that are not student specific. So go to youtube.com and search for Cybr Resume Review, and we'll pull up there. If you'd like to have your own resume submitted for review, go to cybr.com/resume-review, and you can submit it there for free. But that's it for the introduction. Let's go on with the show. If you don't mind just quickly introducing who you are, what your experience level is, and why we have you on the show today.
Of course, and I'm excited to be back. I am a IT recruiter, currently located in the DFW area. I've been around a lot of different industries, but currently I recruit for IT consulting at a company called Dialexa in the DFW area. I'm super excited to be back and help more people with their resumes and, hopefully give some good advice to help people trying to either get into the field or move on to their next career.
And what's exciting is that today we have 3 different resumes, and I believe they're mostly student resumes. So this will be a really good episode. If you're a student, you're trying to break into the field, and you're trying to see on how you can improve your resume before applying for different positions. And we also have one based in the Dallas area, and specifically with an SMU email address. And I know you've got some experience, like you said, since you're based in DFW, you have a lot of experience with different organizations here in the area. So I know you'll be able to provide a lot of really helpful information. But let me go ahead and share my screen. And what we'll do is we'll start with that first resume. If I can find it here, let's see. Yep, there we go. And then I'll hide this bar so I can see what we're talking about, and then we'll get started.
Perfect.
All right. So Sara, the first question I have for you actually, as we dive into this and literally as we get started with it, is when you have a resume that crosses your desk, you've got requirements associated with it. What are some of the first things that usually pop out at you? And within those first seconds, you start to form that opinion of whether it's going to be a good resume for this position or not. Like, what are some of those red flags that might pop out, or even the green flags that tell you that this is a really solid start to a resume? What are some of those key details?
Of course. So whenever we first look at resumes, you'll see the information that's prominently at the top first, and that's what's going to get the most focus. So for students, for anybody really, but for this particular one, a student, having education first as well is good, skills, anything like that. But the further you go down, the less likely people are going to be to pay attention to what's actually on the resume. They'll start skimming through and kind of just looking over information, looking for keywords, things like that. So first off, if you really want to showcase something, you really should put it close to the top, because that's what's going to get the most attention. Now, if your resume has a lot of information on it, or it's overfilled, or it's kind of messy, then you're probably not even going to get that amount of attention, because they're just not going to look into it that well. So having good formatting and then having that information up front is kind of what they're going to be looking for. You definitely don't want to throw everything in the kitchen sink onto your resume. More than 3 pages, anything past 2 isn't going to be looked at, but it really gives you a good chance to showcase what you want to showcase by really putting it right up front for us to look at and see.
And the good news is that all 3 of these resumes today are only 1 page, and that's the first time that's happened on the show. So I'm excited to see that. Also makes sense since these are more student-based resumes as well. And so based on this one alone, and based off what you just said, is there anything that pops out as needing to be modified that just raises that red flag? Or is the format a really good format to communicate what you were just talking about?
Now, it is really clean and it's easily readable. I can tell where the education experience and kind of the projects are. The only note that I would really have in terms of kind of the organization of this one is the skills are at the very bottom. It's not, by the time I read to the very bottom and I'm looking at the skills, I'm not going to pay that close of attention because I've already looked through the entirety of the resume. So moving those skills maybe under education and then having experience, projects, and further education down at the very bottom them as like a little plus, if they're interested at that point, they can read and kind of go into what they're currently working on, would be my biggest note here.
And speaking of skills, and I agree, by the way, I totally forgot they were at the bottom there for a second, but I noticed that they were bolded through the different bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? When does it make sense to bold something? I see the theme here is it does seem to map directly to some of those skills,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. But what are some of your thoughts in terms of when you should bold some of those keywords, when it doesn't make sense?
You can bold keywords, especially if you're trying to showcase a specific technology. Like if you're going for a job or internship that has a technology that they've highlighted in their job description that they're looking for, you can bold that. But if you do bold things, make sure that that is continued throughout the formatting of your experience. You don't want to just have one sentence with 2 bolded words and then that's nowhere else, So just kind of make sure that if you do bold things, it's cohesive, that you're bolding the same sort of things. It's not just random. Like I said, technologies you want to, stand out, information that you maybe want them to see, but make sure it's readable and it's the same thing and you're not overdoing it either. You don't want to have full sentences bolded or, the same word bolded throughout your entire resume. And just as an example of kind of that formatting for this one in particular, they have some words, Python, single page application, React, Django, but down at the second bullet under software developer for the review board, he just has a string of skills bolded in the parentheses. That I would actually take out and maybe move into a separate bullet point or expand on that, make sure that that information is kind of within there. So it looks the same as the paragraph above it instead of just kind of being on its lonesome.
And what about having the further education? So I know you mentioned the skills, maybe even bringing that back up, and then you've got the education all the way at the very top. When do you think, or where do you think, first of all, it makes sense to put further education like they have here with whether it's a course or certification or something like that? Does it ever make sense to move that up, or is that a proper spot for that?
I would consider that to be a proper spot because you really want to showcase your experience and your projects, kind of your past and what you have to offer the company that you're trying to get hired on first. And then for the further education or clubs, open source projects, whatever you've got that you're working on in the background, kind of at the bottom, just so they know that you're continuing. And if they've made it that far, it's an interesting tidbit they can look into. And when you're in the interview process, the interviewers that you're talking to can use that to kind of expand on your skills and get to know you a little better.
And I think we touched on this in the prior episode as well, but it can make sense to move some of that information further up, especially if it is a certification and that certification is either required or listed as a bonus for having for that specific position that you're applying for. And so if you're going through and you're applying for that position, you see they're asking for that certification or something like that, you can go in and put that towards the top, make that stand out, and that way they know that you're a good fit for it. So that's a really good point.
Exactly.
Anything else with this resume before we move on to the next one?
No, it's done really well. It's got a clear kind of break between the information as a recruiter I would want to see and everything that I would want to gain from it. Just with a couple of changes, I think that they could get noticed easily by whoever they're trying to apply for.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. All right, let's move on to the second one. And let me make sure that I fix my sharing here. All right, let me know if you can see the resume.
I can.
Okay, perfect. I've got it figured out. See, second time is the charm. I got it. Okay, so this one I put in second place because it has a lot of similarities with the first one, but it also has some pretty major differences.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, kind of the same question we had earlier of, are there any major red flags that pop out at you right away? Or are there any major positives that you're seeing on this resume so far?
It's got a lot of differences, right? It's a completely different kind of format. It's a different setup, but it's not, it's not a bad thing. A lot of people will send different types of resumes in a lot of different ways, and having something that clearly kind of separate your information is always a good thing. The only thing with this particular resume that I'm seeing is they kind of have a lot of different information for under skills and, you know, volunteer membership work, but not a lot of information under experience or projects. And that's kind of a red flag for a recruiter. I need to know what your experience is and what you like to do, not just what you've worked on. So for this particular one, you know, it'd be great because I'm going to be able to see that you've got, you know, Java and object-oriented programming and HTML, but I may not need to know what you're familiar with or, you know, what you have kind of a basic knowledge of unless it's directly related to the job posting that you have. You know, so shortening that and kind of adding more to like the experience would be something that I would recommend here, because even though I know that they took part in full stack web development, I don't actually know what their part on the team was. So I couldn't actively tell you if they'd be a good fit for what I'm looking for, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely does. And I was going to ask as a clarifying question to that, when is it too much information versus too little information? And I definitely agree that it's probably a little bit too little information in this case, because you're just listing the technologies, you're linking to another link where I can see it says projects in the URL, but I don't necessarily actually know what that's linking to since there's no context around it. And then when it does say full stack web development to support coral reef conservation, that tells me a little bit more about what the project is. But like you said, it doesn't tell me anything about what you contributed to that project and how you helped with it. So when is it too much information? Because I've also seen the opposite of that, where somebody just puts so many bullet points and you're reading it and there's not much substance there. So what is that balance between too much information and too little information?
That is actually, I think, one of the hardest parts of writing a resume, right? Because you want to be able to tell people what you've done and show off everything that you can in order to get noticed. But at the same time, if you put way too much information and you have all of this stuff, the things that you really want to show off are going to get lost, and you're not going to have it, you know, not going to get the reaction that you want out of that resume. So the best thing that I can say with balancing this is to really tailor your resumes to the jobs that you're trying to get. And even though you want to show off, don't try and throw all of the information in there. Kind of keep it to about 3 to 5 bullet points underneath each job. Or, you know, for technologies, you can put, you know, everything that you're really well, you know, knowledgeable about and that you understand. But if you've got 20 different technologies and, you know, all of this information, it's not going to work out. So try and stick to what the job posting is looking for and tailor what you know to what the job posting is looking for, so you can really, you know, you really stand out to the recruiter. Because if I've got a job description, I don't know, you know, clicking a link, what that's going to mean. I can't look at a GitHub and, you know, see that this person understands anything. But, you know, I've got a job description. I say I need somebody who knows, you know, PHP, Python with a little bit of Rails, and that's it. But if I go and I see that you got PHP first and then Rails is number 22, like that's probably not going to get it past me. And it's great that you might know those 22 languages, but you're not showcasing what I'm looking for, so that might get, you know, passed over. So really kind of jump in and, you know, even if you've done 20 years of experience, really highlight the 4 or 5 that match the job posting the best you can in order to get noticed, and then expand on that during the interviews. Don't worry about putting that all up front.
I think a good example of that is in that first project for technology safety that's in progress there. I think it's really good that they managed a team of 3 to source and produce materials. And right away that kind of catches my eye, and I say, you know, that's good. I'm glad that they have some of that management experience with 3 different team members, but I've got a lot of questions about that. And so for sure, I'd bring some of those questions up in the interview, but to get that interview in the first place, what might help me is understanding what that means, right? When you say you manage a team of 3 people, does that mean that you were able to project manage it and therefore you met the requirements on time, or even exceeded that timeline and delivered a week early? Or did you, like, was the code quality above and beyond what was expected. Like, what are some of the key things that you contributed to this project by being a manager of those three different people that could help me contextualize what kinds of questions I could be asking for, and or whether you'll be a good fit for that position, and adding that to some of the other projects as well, instead of just describing what it is, right? Because Stay Safe Orlando, human trafficking awareness, that's awesome. I've got a lot of questions about that, but there's not much information for me to go off of here. And so you may not get that interview because there's a lack of that information. But then if you have enough information to get that interview, I'm going to have a lot of questions about that because I think that's really cool, right? And so I want to go into it.
Like great projects, wonderful kind of interesting things that will lead you to great conversations. But if I'm looking for somebody with, with the ability to move legacy projects or, handle transferring one thing to another, I'm not going to know if this person can do that. Even though they've done great things with great programs, it's not going to make it past me to get to that interview point to really kind of find out, the human behind the paper.
Absolutely. One other question I had about, especially on the right-hand side, I found this interesting, right? They have the technologies and they have the tools, and then they break it down into intermediate proficiency or intermediate plus and basic proficiency. What do you think? Is that a good idea? Is that something people should do more often of? What are your thoughts?
I'm on the fence about that, honestly. For some students, it would be good, especially if they're going into a field where, it's like academia, it's information, if they're moving into a company whose culture is kind of that learning, having those different proficiencies but for saving space and just, having the information available to recruiters, I would say that you're better off using that space for something else and really kind of just showcasing what you're proficient in overall, or for example, like if they have a specific types of technologies on the job description that you do have knowledge in that plus 2 or 3 other things, rather than having that all in there and readily available. Not only does that show me as a recruiter that you've read through the job posting and that you're interested in my company as a whole, but it also makes me think that you're not just spreading your resume to everybody under the sun. It gets me excited because you're excited about us, if that makes sense.
One other thing that confuses me a little bit, and I was trying to think if there was a rhyme or reason to it, and I think there is, but I'm still confused because when you have intermediate plus proficiency and then basic and then familiar with, and then the other section, and so it kind of looks like the other is meant to be more of different tools that they've used, like FileZilla, Eclipse, things like that. But why is that separate from familiar with or basic proficiency or intermediate? I don't really know what that means, right? So that is a little bit confusing as somebody who's reviewing the resume to try and understand what you mean by that. Does that mean you've used it once, more than once? I just don't know, right? It's a little bit confusing.
Exactly. I would much rather see that under your project or experience as a bullet point telling me what you did with it rather than just having it listed on a resume.
That's a good point. Yeah. Awesome. Anything else last minute before we move on to the third one?
No, but it's really interesting. If I want to look into these projects myself, so hopefully, hopefully you'll be able to expand on that a little bit and make the next interview they have that much more exciting.
I'm definitely going to have to pull up some of those projects and reach back out to this person because that sounds very interesting. I'd like to learn more about it.
For sure.
Right, let me flip over to the third one. I think I got the right one. Let me know if.
Yes,
what's that?
It's good. I see it.
Okay, perfect. I know 2 of them have blue and it's like this small little window. So I'm like, am I clicking the right blue one? I don't know. So this is the Dallas one. So that's awesome. Southern Methodist University, not a university that I went to since I'm not from here, but I know you're very familiar with it.
I am.
You've been here for a very long time and you have a lot of experience in the DFW area. And so I'm very interested in hearing your experience so far about what you're seeing, just like the other 2, what's really standing out as a positive here and what's standing out as maybe not so much a positive in this case.
Of course. So, SMU, we have a lot of SMU alumni at Dialexa. It's going to be quite fun. I know that as soon as a lot of my coworkers watch this one, they're going to, say, hey, I might know this person. We have a lot of adjunct professors and everything. So it's it's going to be really interesting to see what they have to say. But this one, you can see that they've got a lot of experience and it's structured well. The only thing that I can note about the structure of the overall resume is it does run together a lot. They have titles like education and experience, but there's not a real break. So my eye just kind of runs all the way through it rather than stopping and actually reading and, taking in information step by step. So in this instance, I would recommend some sort of line break or something between, education and skills and then experience, projects, and then activities, just so it breaks it up a little bit and my eye knows where to jump rather than kind of scanning it all in one go. Also, under experience for this one, I know that internship and other experience is separate, but I wouldn't actually separate that because it is, different experience for internships, but it's still job, it's still experience, it's still, the same as you would be under a research assistant and program manager. So having those two separate for me, just takes up extra space. I'd rather see those kind of all together so I can read through it at once rather than, stopping and asking, well, why is this other experience? Like, what is that different from what you've done before? But overall, it's really well, explained. I kind of can read through and see what they've done on each one. They've got, a lot of good information for me to see that they did work for AT&T and I get to see their specific projects and everything they worked on and kind of have a general overview, of what they accomplished in those couple of months. And that's really good. It goes into detail without over explaining or under explaining. And it makes me excited to see, and talk to this person and kind of dive a little deeper.
And it's funny because I'm sitting here listening to the advice, right? And as we're going through these different resumes, I'm seeing different parts where something we might have said for the first resume is implemented here, but maybe this resume could benefit from a couple of things implemented in the first one as well. So hopefully that does provide some additional value. And one of those things being, right, the separation of the different sections, but also having the skills and education at the top versus the first one, the skills were at the bottom. You mentioned other and activities. And that's one other question I have because I've heard conflicting feedback on this. Personally, I love seeing stuff like what they put on here, which says, I enjoy taking my dogs for a walk. I enjoy lifting, trying new things, reading, playing any sport, but preferably soccer, which in this case literally checks all of my boxes. I love my dog, Biscuit. He's awesome. I love lifting weights. I love trying new things. I love reading and I love soccer. So I get to relate with that, right? And so it's like, it can definitely, I could see that working in your favor, but I've also heard the opposite where sometimes people think it's too much information. Yeah. What's that balance again? How do you know when it's too much or when it's too little?
I think that having a short blurb about yourself to humanize yourself on your resume is a great thing, depending on the company that you're trying to apply for. Now, company cultures vary, and that means what the recruiter's looking for will vary as well. Usually, with startups, they have more of like a homegrown culture. They want to know the person. They're not going to hire based off, skills specifically, but for, culture fit and value. But for a big Fortune 500 company, banking institution, that's not going to be something that really resonates with the recruiter. They're going to want to see fact and kind of, A to Z, and this is what I'm looking for. So really do pay attention to the company culture that you're applying for and kind of tailor, the structure of and the comfort level of your resume, I guess, to the company that you're trying to apply for. I personally love seeing these little blurbs as long as it doesn't take up a lot of space and as long as it's a cute little addition to a resume. I do have to say it's made differences for me on, making final decisions specifically with interns on a college level. If I had A and B and they were matched and B had a blurb about how they created and ran a fan a fan site for some local rapper and it was really interesting and it made that person more relatable and made them want to talk to him more and they got the interview over the other one. So that can really be kind of the human part of your resume. So if you have room and it's the right kind of, if you're looking for a certain company and culture, and you know that that's going to be well received there because, you know, you've done your research, you looked at the company, then I would say include it. But if you're going for like banking or something like that, maybe kind of leave that off for now and let your personality shine in interviews instead.
You bring up a really good point, and frankly, I've gotten in a lot of heated debates over what I'm about to say, and it's because it's something I really believe in. But the fact of the matter is, in my personal opinion, even if you're a student, and I get that when you're getting out of school, you may not want to be as picky because you're just trying to get that experience. It might be difficult to get the initial job, and I totally get that. But with that said, I do think it's important that you try to pick an organization that does align with your values and a culture that you want to be a part of, because they'll just make that experience so much more enjoyable. And so if you put this information in there, and like Sarah said, some organizations might be more cut and dry, and you can tell that from their online brand or the way that their culture is or whatever else, it may not resonate with them. That's maybe a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that can help close doors that should not be open in the first place. And so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Now, if you're just trying to get as many interview opportunities as humanly possible, maybe you remove some of that information for a job posting where you think it will hurt you. But again, I'd go back to this, right? I think if that's the type of person you are, you may not be happy in an environment like that. So leave that in there and keep those doors shut, I guess, is a way of putting it.
Yeah, I have to completely agree. I know that getting a job, you know, in any market, especially now with kind of our new normal, is really scary. You know, you want to try and get as much opportunities as you can. But if you get into a job, and even if you get the job and it's not a good culture fit, within 3 to 4 months, you're going to be miserable. You're not going to work well with the team. You're not going to really feel like you can do best. So having that in mind at the very beginning when you're applying to these jobs and tailoring your resume and kind of going through the interview process, that it's not only, you know, that they're looking for you as an employee, but you're looking at them as an employer and as a fit as well, is going to save you a lot of time and heartache in the long run.
You made me think of a question, and I guess we can wrap up with this unless you have anything else to add for this third and last resume. But when we look at resumes like this, especially if it's somebody who has more recently entered the workforce. Actually, no, I take that back. It can be anyone. If you're looking at the length of time that somebody has stayed at their positions, whether it's their first entry level position, whether it's 5, 6, 7 different positions that they've been at what point do you think it harms the candidate to see that they've only been there for a year or 6 months or a year and a half maybe, versus being there for 5 years or 6 years or 7 years? At what point do you think that hurts?
So it's actually a changing thing within, you know, recruiting in the industry. And, you know, 15 years ago, it was normal to see, you know, somebody who'd been at a company for 7 years, 10 years. That was kind of the normal. You know, with the new kind of way that hiring is and the way that recruiting is in general, these days it's normal for somebody to stay at a company for about a year or two before moving on to the next opportunity. That's just kind of what we see. That's kind of, you know, how it is with kind of, I don't want to call it millennial mindset because I'm a millennial myself, but I've heard it been called that in the past. So that's not like a huge red flag for recruiters. You know, of course, if they've been in the game a while, you know, people might have different thoughts about that, but be about a year or two at every company is about normal. Now, if you see somebody moving on every 3 months, 6 months, and they're not contract,
right,
that might raise some red flags, because you want to kind of get to the story of why that is, especially if they've got like 7 or 8 in a row. But you know, my best advice would be, if you can, try and stay at least a year somewhere, because any less than that, especially multiple times in a row, will kind of throw up a red flag and make recruiters question that a little bit. Unless you're a contractor, of course, then it's natural. But
and obviously here as well, right? If you have an internship, that's how internships are. They're
exactly.
structured that way, so not really applicable there. But I wanted to ask, because as these students enter the workforce, it's something to think about. Going back to the whole concept of, be a little bit choosy of who you go with. Make sure it's somebody that you think is going to be a good fit. And it may end up not being a good fit at the end of the day, but at least you put some thought behind it. I also understand you've got some bills to pay most likely, right? So it's the balance of getting the job versus continue on with your search and trying to find somebody who will be a better, quote unquote, better employer for you longer term, so that you don't have those 3 to 6 month spurts. You have longer time, which, and by the way, personal opinion again, as we wrap up here, it's very hard to build skill set or really get into the quote unquote juicy parts of that job if you're there for less than 6 months. It's really hard. It really is, because you're just getting onboarded, you're getting settled in, you're getting part of that or embedded in that team. You're starting to learn people's names and beyond the names around that 6 month mark. And so if you leave, you kind of, I feel like you missed out on a lot of that. So something to think about. But anyway, I'm gonna get off my soapbox here. And Sarah, anything else you want to add for these 3 resumes?
No, this is good. For a student resume, this would be somebody that I would see and I would be interested in talking to. Other than, of course, the couple little things, I think that this has got a good amount of information and, a good amount of humanization, and it should be good to go with a few little tweaks.
Sarah, thank you again for hopping on. And I'm super glad that it just ended up being that we had 3 different student resumes here. It just, I like seeing that variety, and I think it brought on different questions and brought on different answers as well. And so thank you again for hopping on. I know we got some really good feedback from the last episode. I hope we get to see you again in the future at some point. And thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh, I'd love to. I run the internship program with our HR, here at Dialexa. So I'm super excited to see these students, and I hope we get even more resumes next time.
So if or not the resumes, but I can't speak tonight. I guess it's Friday. So my brain's already shut off. It's like, all right, time to go drink a beer and relax. But if the people who have applied and have their resumes here, obviously they're anonymized, so you don't know who they are. But if they're interested in reaching out because they resonated with what you said in this episode, or even if somebody's listening and they also resonated and they want to reach out for whatever reason, how might they do that?
Of course. So I'm, of course, on LinkedIn. I'm all over the place there. So if you find this through LinkedIn, you can just follow the link back and connect with me directly. Or you can go to the Dialexa career page and contact us through there. That goes directly to my inbox. Or, I try and hop in the beer and chill that you guys so graciously, host for us. And if you just want to chat or have a question, you can hop in and see me there as well.
I keep forgetting to promote the beer and chill. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, because I should be the one doing it and I don't. So thank you. If you want to learn more about that, go to cybr.com/Discord. It'll sign you up for our Discord server. And then in the Discord server, we've got more information about events. And we have a great community of over 100 people at this point in time. They share resources, they ask questions. It's great for beginners, and it's also great for more advanced cybersecurity or IT professionals who want to give back to the community. And so if you'd like to be part of the beer and chill, or even just part of that community, definitely check us out there. Also, I'll be sure to include some links for Sarah's LinkedIn and other means of reaching her. Sarah, thank you again. Hope you have a fantastic weekend and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, you too. I appreciate it.
So if you found this show helpful, please subscribe on YouTube to make sure that you don't miss any of the future episodes. In future episodes, we will review between 3 and 4 different resumes, which, by the way, if you want to submit your own, again, go to cybr.com/resume-review for that application process. It's free and it's super simple. And then what we'll do is we'll take 3 to 4 different resumes each time we have a new episode in the show. And then we'll also invite a guest. And those guests could be IT hiring managers, or they could be HR leaders, they could be IT recruiters, just anybody that has a lot of different experience with reviewing resumes and opening as well as accepting different candidates for their different positions. So again, subscribe to our channel to not miss any future updates, and go ahead and submit your own resume for application. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.